Hype. All right, we've got the Group B final match. So I can update. I haven't updated the. So Sonic is gonna kind of withdraw. So everyone else gets 2 points, which is more my bad than anything because he didn't really want to play. I kind of strong armed him into playing, and then he still didn't want to play, and that's really my bad. All right, today we've got Guitar versus Waffles. So this is the final match of the group stage. Hype. The winner, there's stakes, big stakes on this match. As we can tell that the winner, so Johnny won against both of them. So this is the only match remaining. The winner of this will advance to the bracket. So big stakes, eternal glory on the line. Let's see what we've got here. Oh, whoops. Trying to get the cropping right. Whatever. I think they're slightly different sizes. Should we make them the same size for OCD? Still wrong. Okay, that looks precise. Okay. So game number 1. So these were played yesterday. I do know the result, I think, based on the chatter in the channel, but I don't know the exact result of each game, and I could be wrong, so it's still gonna be hype. And I haven't looked at the games yet, so this is all very exciting. First time for me as well. Waffles opens with the king's pawn, e4, and we have e5, knight f3, knight c6, c3, so it's a little bit more customary for white to bring the light squared bishop to the dark square. But this game, c3, preparing to play d4, of course. Makes sense. Black threatens the pawn. We push and capture the pawn. And white pushes, so black is up a pawn. This knight's going to be a little awkward. It's got to go backwards somewhere. Okay, now it's blocking in the bishop. It is threatening the e5 pawn, however. Okay, so Waffles retakes to tie the material advantage. Black's threatening this, but the queen is defending it, so for now it's a bit of a much ado about nothing. So both players lost their king pawn, the e pawn. I would like to see, I like moving the bishop. I would like to see it moved here, or maybe not there. I think this is one of these two squares might be better because this knight on e4 is you don't want it to sit there all game. It's in a great spot. It's hitting some really potentially juicy squares for a black attack, so I want to get it out of there. So I would want to put my bishop here. This one, so it supports the pawn, but also it's limited by the pawn. It's not really hitting f7. So as long as this pawn, I think if I'm black, I want to keep the pawn on d5 forever, so that white's bishop is dumb, or try to get rid of it immediately. So now, on the one hand, that kind of helps white because now this line is open for the bishop, but I assume we're going to see d5. Yeah, so it's kind of shut down anyway. And now this is a pretty nice structure supporting the knight on e4. So I think overall, pretty reasonable result for black. Pretty reasonable result for white. This looks like a nice game so far. All right, we're eyeing f2. Still defended twice, so you can't. It's not really threatening it yet. White can move out the bishop to contest the queen on the diagonal, but that hangs b2. So pretty nice move to eyeing two things at once. You can't take either of them immediately, but the pressure is there. Knight moves in. If you want to kick the knight away, you might not want to, because that's opening up potentially... I can't do the diagonals on this. I gotta play more os to get my mouse accuracy up. You can kick the knight away, but it comes with the cost of weakening the light squares. Oh boy. So this is like a I give 0 fucks, I'm attack. Sorry for the language, children. Not really, you'll learn it someday. The bishop is targeting the pawn immediately. It's defended by the knight, so there's a little combination here. You could play bishop takes knight, bishop recaptures to remove the defender of the pawn, and then capture. Then the rook is going to slide over, and this attack is pretty scary. You actually, I don't think you could defend. You have to put your knight in the way, and then it's going to get kicked. That looks really terrifying, because normally you could at least play like f3 or something, but it's pinned. So that just looks like a really scary situation. Queen comes out. This is pretty dangerous. You'd like to be able to... I think black's best move here would be pawns takes a step backward to g6. This f2 square is pretty tough to defend now. Maybe you have to bring your knight back. Or maybe you just castle and say, take my pawn. Excuse me, take my pawn, I don't care. You're just opening up more lines to your king. Castle, okay. Although probably now white will take with the knight and fork the rooks. Yeah, so that's a little annoying. Okay, recapturing the knight kind of matters, because it can... Sometimes it's okay to leave, you know, a piece takes your rook in the corner, you can kind of leave it if it has no escape, but it does have an escape which threatens your other rook. So I think recapturing is kind of important. The game's still okay. I mean, white is ahead material here, being up a rook for a knight, but all of black's pieces will be on the king side, and all of white's pieces are set up for the next game. So this, I think I would probably still prefer black, assuming you recapture this knight. This looks like a really fun attacking game for black. We push, and the push I'm not so thrilled about, because it cuts off the line to the king. I think maybe, if anything, if I'm going to cut off my own queen, maybe I want to play this one so that I open this kind of lateral horizontal movement for the queen. Now the queen could slide over. You know, if you imagine that eventually this pawn moves forward and gets traded away, then maybe sliding the queen over to g6 would be good, assuming the rook or the knight's gone. Anyway, okay, and then a recapture. Good. Sorry for all my throat clearing. It's morning or something. So, okay, so bishop takes bishop, check. I think you got to recapture it. But this queen is going to be pesky. If you recapture, well, even if you don't, the queen has a really nice infiltration square to hit everything. Or if you capture, then the queen could slide down here. I guess you could push the pawn to pin along the diagonal. But I think black can handle that without too much issue. But I think you got to retake. Ooh, infiltration square. Now pinning the knight. You save the bishop by... This is the piece that threatens it, so you pin it to the king. That's pretty savage. And it's tough to hold everything here. Okay, another threat on the bishop. I think if you slide the rook over, you're holding everything somehow, other than this knight, which is going to fall. So this one holds this, but now the bishop's going to fall. And it's all kind of falling apart. This is like a house of cards. And this is a really difficult strategy, or not strategy, but like a technique. Like having all these light kind of light infantry sort of pieces, you know, not your rooks or your queens. Getting them all to all work together and kind of coordinate can be really challenging in some positions. Especially when you have a queen who's going to jump in and threaten everything. It's kind of tough to... That's why I like, you know, if you imagine the pawn steps back, then this pawn supports this pawn, which supports the bishop. That's kind of like a nice, stable, sound structure, right? It all makes sense. There's only one weakness in that situation. But with the pawn a little bit farther up, then it's like neither of these... I mean, you know, this knight is defending the bishop, but it's fewer defenders. They're all kind of like, there's no defender on this piece, no defender on this piece, no defender on this. Right now there's only one on the bishop, etc. It's like if you have your pieces all kind of supporting each other, like this is a good example. Anyway, so I think it's kind of falling apart, but black still has enough pieces in the game, and the king is still, like, you know, these 3 pieces for white still haven't moved. So I'm not going to call the game over yet. I think if I were white, though, I would definitely take the queen, because I don't see how you could lose to a knight and a rook. Once the queen comes off, I would feel very, you know, like, not safe, but like a lot less threatened. Whereas when there's a queen still on the board for black, I feel like there's more potential pitfalls. So we're throwing all the pawns. Looks good. Good attack. However, the rook was guarding the knight. And now, finally, what are we? Move 28. These pieces are going to start getting involved. Excellent. Man, still a rook and a queen. Could be some issues, but the pawns look pretty good for blunting the black offensive. Oh! That's going to be the killing blow. Yeah, and checkmate. So this game was pretty cool. I really like black's position here. I think, and I love the spirit behind g5 to just, you know, let's go. I'm attacking this king. All these pieces are dumb. I'm attacking the king with everything. I love the spirit. I think maybe just a little bit more restraint, because the queen coming out was a problem. So maybe it would have been better to push this pawn rather than this pawn. If you start with the h pawn, it's supported by the rook, so it's like a dual purpose of, like, you're still attacking the king, but you're also opening the line for your rook. And then if you imagine you push it out to h4 or something, the queen can't come to h5 because the rook is guarding that square. Maybe, I don't know. I love the spirit. I think it's a fascinating move. I think it's tough to manage all the pieces once you split your pawns like that. Yeah, and I think your knight can come back here to defend this. And then if white takes the bishop, you got to take with this knight. And I think you can hold it all together, but it's not easy. It's coordinating all these pieces is not that easy. But and then still this attack looks really fun for black. But then once the queen gets in like this, it's like it's so hard to hold everything together. It's pinning the knight, it's hitting the bishop. It's really tough. But Fun game one. So Waffles takes the first one with white against Guitar. Let's see what happens in game two. So now Guitar with the white pieces also opens with the king's pawn. And we have Alekine's defense, immediately threatening the pawn. So if you bring out the knight, you just lose your pawn. Or if you try to play d5, you can lose your pawn. So, right, you push it. Stable. And now this doesn't really threaten the knight as much. I think it's more common to play c4. And the knight goes over to b6. And then you can bring your bishop to d3. And then I think like the classical theory is that like white should have a better game because white has a big center and a lot of space. But at the same time, if the pawns get pushed too far, they can become a liability rather than a benefit. So it can go both ways. All right, so the knight is cemented in the center unless white wants to bring back the bishop and play c4, which is possible. But I think this pawn structure would be great if your light squared bishop were out. But the light squared bishop is like never getting out this game. It's going to take forever. f6 so early, I don't know. I'm not sure about that. There's serious potential weaknesses here. Let's see, castle. Okay. And this is kind of an elementary thing, but if you want to relieve the pin, it like 99 times out of 100, you want to do it with the bishop. First of all, when you move your queen up, you block your bishop, so your bishop can't get out. And second of all, it's still kind of pinned. Right? Like, in theory, technically you can move your knight, but then you lose your queen. So blocking with the bishop is the proper way. Especially here, okay? And a capture. So white's down a pawn. The other thing is, if you block with the bishop, then you can castle. And you might still lose a pawn, but then your king is safely tucked away. All of black's pieces are over here. And this knight can't move. And the bishop can't move. Ever. So I actually think even though black can still win a pawn on c3 after all the exchanges, basically like what happened in the game. But if you imagine in this position, white has a bishop on d2 and is castled, then you can imagine it's like these pieces are going to come out. God, diagonals are hard. And black's king is still sitting in the center. You could trade these pawns, and then the pawns are even not that solid, and these pieces haven't moved yet. It could be good. This one I couldn't understand. So one thing to note is that the queen is pinned. If you move the knight back, you lose the queen. So even this position looks kind of good for white. So black wants to threaten the bishop instead, but you can take with the queen, right? Yeah. Nice. Okay. Yeah, and the queen defends everything. And black's pieces are still truant. That's your vocabulary word for the day. Drops the bishop back, hit the queen. Nice. Okay. Castle. Nice. We're in okay, white's not even wait, white's down a pawn still. No, white's up a knight or a bishop for a pawn. And the bishops are, they don't have incredible scope yet, but you can see white can push the pawns or capture any time to start opening up the lines. King's still in the center. These pieces, okay, white's in the driver's seat here for sure. Capture, capture. Knight comes up. So one thought might be, for black, you gotta push this and like get your knight over, and then get your bishop out somehow. Maybe play this so you can get your bishop here. But you also probably really want to move your king. You also want to move this so your queen can start to slide over. Black has a lot of things to do. I think from white, it's simpler. I think you can just move your pawns. Okay, so kick the knight out. Support the knight, maybe? Knight? Wow. Every move. Okay, now the knight can come back, and this is a terrific square for it. Okay. So the queen is in. I think black has made some success in the last 10 moves or so, because I think this sort of pawn structure now is going to be difficult for white to break through. I think white can still do it, but as long as this pawn is on d5, the d4 pawn is stuck, so the bishop isn't that useful, and then these pawns obviously are limiting the other bishop. So black's done a pretty good job here of kind of limiting the effectiveness of the white bishops so far. And these were like the main pieces white was going to attack with. So I think it's still good for white. Game's still good for white, but it's... Black has bought some time, effectively. Doesn't that hang a knight? Okay. Okay. Get the rook on the open file. That makes sense. I really want to... Okay, the knight is pretty good on g4. It's defending against the rook. It's not really threatening too much, so I think I really want to put it on e5, but also that like fixes the structure even more. So maybe it's more important to like get your bishop into the game this way somehow, or play c3, move your bishop down so that it's on this, I don't know, or just play f4 and start opening the f file so that you can like maybe trade rooks and then bring your other rook over. And black has to somehow get these pieces into the game. This is the worst bishop ever. It's a huge liability that has to be defended, but it's not doing anything ever. Although if it could take the king, that'd be nice, but it's just me being bad at doing the lines. Okay. Okay. We're gonna repeat? No? Okay. Yeah, I think like having your queen deep in the enemy structure like this is delicious, but maybe it'd be more prudent to bring it back. Bring it back and reroute it. I'm not sure. It looks kind of scary, like it could get almost trapped up here. Okay, now black is eyeing this. So one thing the knight was doing when it was on g4 was defending the f2 pawn. And once it moves, and this is a great square for it, but now the f2 pawn is a little loose. And it could drop off here. Okay, now the bishop is one pawn move away from getting into the attack as well. White's starting to look dangerous. Excellent pin or fork, hitting literally every piece. Oops. Okay, this is important. I think I know what's going to happen here from the chat. This is important. White can win the game. This is a really nice reading puzzle. White can effectively win. It's not checkmate, but white can effectively win the game on this move. Maybe if you're following along at home, if it's not obvious, maybe pause and take a minute to think it over, try to figure it out, because this is several techniques in one, but one main technique. And the first hint is it's a discovery. Okay, so the idea is when you have queens looking at each other, but there's one piece in between, and also neither queen is being defended by any other piece. That should set off like alarm bells in your head, like, oh, something spicy could happen. So the next thing, if you control the piece that's in the middle, you want to look for checks. Because if you can move the piece away with check, then the other person's queen is a sitting duck. So here you have two knight moves. If you take the knight on f8, it looks nice. You get a rook for a knight, but you're exposing your queen. So the black queen's going to come over and take yours, and then that'd be a disaster. However, you have another knight takes rook move, which comes with check, which is really important, because then black doesn't have time to take your queen. Black's probably going to take the knight either with the pawn or the rook to relieve the check on the king, and then you could take black's queen. So, but we have rook captures pawn, which kind of lets black off the hook a bit. Rook captures, so still here, still knight f6 is still the game-winning move. You don't get the rook anymore. The rook will just come back and capture it, but you still get the queen. That's a shame. And now there's a checkmate in one move, actually. That's a shame. Now I understand. It's a good thing I never reviewed these games and didn't upload them, because that would be very uncool of me. But yeah, it's a shame. This is we got to see a great game, like an evenly balanced match that then in game one that slightly went in Waffle's favor towards the end, and in this one, Guitar had just really solid opening middle game, had a great position, great attack going, and then in chess sometimes it happens. It's just one slip up, just one mistake, and it all falls apart. And that's in that way, chess is life. Chess is life. So, whap takes it 2-0. So we can update the... So A1, this guy, Peter? I don't know Peter, but Peter took it. And second place was Lord of Dabu. And then in Group B, Johnny. So we get super hype ultimate match, Johnny versus Dabu in one of the semifinals. And then this Peter guy against Whap Waffles as the other semifinal. I'm sure that'll be an exciting match too. Cool. Next videos will be the championship bracket play, and then third place game eventually if people want to. So good stuff. Congrats to Whap for advancing, and hats off to Guitar for 95% of a excellent game, and then just one mistake. It's a shame, but GG's.